I have to say how wonderful it is to be standing here and looking out at all of you. It really feels like coming home. Listen for the word of God. On that day, that three-word phrase is so small that it's easy and I think often overlooked. It is most often read on that day as if it was a simple another day, and here's what they did that day. But what if we hear it as on that day, as if there was something different about that day? That short phrase, as it turns out, is quite important for setting the stage for this familiar story of Jesus calming the storm. On that day can remind us of the miracles that come before this in Mark's gospel. There are 4 miracles just prior to this passage. They were all miracles of healing, to which the disciples were simply observers. This is Jesus' first miracle involving nature, and the first miracle which directly and personally involves the life and well-being of the disciples on that day. So far in Mark's gospel, he has told us quite a bit about Jesus' miracles of healing, but he has told us very little about the disciples. We know that they followed Jesus around and listened to him. We know that Mark tells us in chapter 3, Jesus designated 12 of them to have a particular part in his ministry. And we know that Jesus has been privately teaching this group about his parables and life. Yet at this point in Mark's gospel, we don't know anything about what they think of him or their understanding of who he is. The lake crossing scene seems to be an opportunity for Jesus' followers to reveal what they know or don't know about Jesus and to see what their faith is, or if they have it. Jesus performs an entirely astonishing act, this his first miracle involving the forces of nature, forces utterly beyond human control. And yet this astonishing thing that he does initially inspires in his followers confusion and terror. We hear that a great storm materializes. In Greek, the word for great is megas. Megas, even beyond great. It was furious and violent, this storm that threatens to sink the boats. Now, the disciples fish for a living. They spent a good part of their lives on the lake. They've been through storms. They know storms on the lake. And so perhaps we should consider their judgment when they feel that they are going to perish in this tempest that has come up on the lake. Nothing in this text indicates that they overreacted. What is indicated in this text was that this was no common storm and they were panicked. And yet we are told Jesus sleeps on a pillow in the stern of the boat, peaceful and unafraid. When his companions wake him, accusing him of indifference and negligence, they have lost all hope. Their words reveal that they have already figured out how this scenario is going to play out. Jesus, we're about to drown. Wake up. The disciples wanted Jesus to be awake, to be engaged, to share in their fear. Don't you care about what's happening? Wake up and be afraid with us. That's what they asked for. That's what they wanted. That Jesus gave them what they needed: peace and calm in the midst of their fears and their anxiety, their panic. Have you had those times in your life when you felt that you were all alone, that you were in the midst of a storm, like the disciples? Have you asked similar questions? I have. But here's my question for you today. Does God intentionally put crisis in our lives because there is something we need to learn? Or does God give us the strength to learn and to see life more clearly from what life puts in front of us? Personally, I believe the latter. Perhaps God doesn't fix things the way we think it should happen. And sometimes we want God to be present and respond to us in the way that we ask, just like the disciples. Don't you care? Wake up, pay attention, respond. Respond to what I'm going through in the way that I need you to respond. I've learned from crisis in my own life that God doesn't always give us what we ask for or what we want, but God always, always gives us what we need. In storms that create fear and stress in our own lives, the question isn't, has God forgotten me? It's not, God didn't answer my prayer because I didn't get the response, the miracle, the sign that I asked for. African Americans in the 19th century, in the troubles they lived through, the troubles that life put in front of them, sang, God may not come when you call, but he'll be there right on time. The key is to have open hearts and open minds and recognize the miracles and the signs and the peace and the hope that God gives us in the best of times and in the worst of times. On that day, the disciples wanted Jesus to wake up and be afraid with them. What he gave them was peace and calm and hope, as he asks, where is your faith? Jesus' followers are learning a whole lot more about who Jesus is and learning to have trust and to act with faith. When sometimes, as in our text today, and sometimes in the realities of our own life, it has generated more fear than faith. But here's the thing, faith isn't an opaque constant. Faith is a verb, it's not passive. It's something that we do. And it's something that we work at, and it ebbs and it flows, and sometimes we do it really well, and sometimes not so good. But faith through all of it is trusting in what we hope for and trusting in the assurance of what is unseen, even on those days when our faith is ebbing more than it's flowing. On that day, the disciples asked, who is he? Well, we have the advantage of knowing the end of the story. We know who he is. And on this day and every day, may you trust in the strength that God gives you to navigate in this world, as uncertain and frightening as it can be sometimes. And with open hearts and minds, recognize and embrace all those miracles in your own life, whatever form they take, whatever shape or size, whether it's what you asked for or a surprise. Miracles by the grace of God who calms the storms and gives us peace and hope, and who might not always give us what we ask for, but always gives us what we need. Thanks be to God.